Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and welcome to the next tutorial on the engine start procedure in the JustFlight Avro. Now, you might have noticed some fancy music going on in the background, and that is because I have just opened one of the doors to show you how to close them and how to do that properly. So we're going to start by actually retracting the air stairs. And once those are retracted, we are next going to close that door, and we will do that manually. So let's just go back into the cabin for a moment. And once our stairs are retracted, as we can see over here, we can go ahead and close those doors. Now, closing the door is easily done by clicking the door selector over here. Make sure that it's closed. And thereafter you can arm the door by pulling the handle out over here. And with that, our door is armed. Last but not least, if you're wondering about the fancy music, that comes from up here, so if you just want to get rid of it, just turn that system off. Alright, so next up, let's go ahead and close the cockpit door. We can either lock it manually up here, or we can just lock it through the door selector down here, which is what I'm going to do. So let's hit lock up here, and with that our flight deck door is closed and locked. When we initiate the startup procedure and when we are requesting the startup clearance, we are going to do that after turning on your transponder so that you pop up on your air traffic controller's ground radar. Now, once that is done, let's go ahead with the before start procedure. We are going to start over here by turning on the fuel pumps. Make sure that all 4 pumps are on. If you still have the external power connected, that is a very good reminder to turn it off right now and to remove your chocks as well. Be aware that you can only remove the chocks once the ground power actually turns grey. Because right now the ground power is shutting down and getting disconnected, and only once that is done you can remove your chocks like this. So, next up we move further forward and turn on the engine anti-ice. Now this is a point that many people ask about, so I will explain it now. The engine anti-ice is turned on in the Avros because the anti-ice opens a valve in the engines which removes or which depletes bleed air from the compressor section of the engines. This means during the engine start, less pressure will resist the engine start, and therefore the engine start works better. Or let's just say the chance of a hung start is reduced. Moving on then, we move further to the right to our APU air, which we are going to turn off, and the packs, which we are going to turn off, and last but not least we move up and turn the beacon on. So let's just visualize the flow once again. Make sure the pumps are on, engine anti-ice is on, APU air off, packs off, beacon on. Alright, and when that is completed, you can go ahead and read the before engine start checklist. Now, let's go ahead with the actual engine start itself. So, in order to be able to start the engines, we turn on the Thrustmaster and then select the engine we want to start over here. When that is done, we turn the engine button into the start position, and that initiates the engine start sequence. We verify that N2 is increasing, we verify that N1 is increasing, and at 10% N2 we are going to turn the fuel lever to the on position. Alright, and with that our engine is now starting up. You have 4 engines to start, which means it will take quite a while, but there is just no way around this in the Avro. You wanted to fly on those 5 APUs, you gotta start those 5 APUs. Okay, so once the engine is stabilized, or at least close to stabilized, we can go ahead and start engine number 3. So we are close to being stabilized up here, so let's move the start selector to number 3, engine start on, and now engine number 3 is also starting. We observe N2, we observe N1, we reach 10% N2, turn on the fuel, and now the engine is running up. Alright, let's use the other two engine starts to discuss a couple of the peculiarities of the engine start. So, reaching about 18% N1, the starters are going to disengage, and then we can proceed with our next engine. So let's start number 2 over here. Now, you might have noticed that it is very hard to actually reach the fuel levers down here, or the knobs to use to initiate the fuel flow. Now, if you look very carefully, you might be able to find some click spots from your standard viewpoint, but I recommend that you do some assignments so that you can actually move your point of view around in the flight deck. Now, the easiest way to do this is to find the so-called translate view functions in the MSFS settings, but you might use some pre-saved views as well. Right, last but not least, let's go ahead and start engine number 1. And we're going to use this engine start in order to not only look at the primary instruments, but also at the secondary engine instruments. So, of course, we observe the standards, N2 increasing, N1 increasing, 10% fuel on. But there is more. You also need to look at the instruments up here. The triple indicator above the engine instruments indicates your secondary engine information. Most importantly, the oil pressure, which we need to ensure is rising, and the oil temperatures, which we gotta ensure are not going into the reds. Okay, so now we have a good engine starter number 1, and you can nicely see how the oil quantity is now decreasing because the oil is being sucked into the engine and used in the engine. So that's a pretty cool simulation here, especially since it is different, or slightly different, on all of the 4 engines. Just like the N1 is slightly different on all of the 4 engines. Basic stable parameters are what you can see here, around 24, 25, 400 degrees, around about 50% N2. Okay, so when the engine start is completed, we can continue our procedures. And the after start procedure now prepares the airplane for operation. So we start up here with the brake fans in auto, engine hydraulic pumps on, AC pump auto, PTU on, engine 3 hydraulic pump on. Moving further down, we are going to turn on the engine driven generators, and we can set the engine anti-ice as needed. Today we don't have icing conditions, so we can switch it off over here. Moving up, we set the engine start selector to off and the start master to off, and once the start master is off, you will notice the engine driven generators are actually going to come online. Just to demonstrate that again, when the start master is on, the engine generators are offline. When you turn it off, they do come online. Moving over to the right, we turn on all our heaters, and last but not least, the APU air and the packs again. You will notice that the APU stays on at this point. Do not switch off the APU, keep it on. Next up, we are moving further down. We are going to select our flaps into the takeoff position, which is 18 today and on most flights. And then we can do our flight control track. And that goes full up, full down, neutral, full left, full right, neutral, and the rudders. And if those are not moving, you most likely have your pushback menu selected up here. But that's just the most likely reasons. There are a couple others as well. In any case, this concludes our after start procedure. So now you can go ahead and read the after engine start checklist. You will notice one point over here that seems to differ a little bit from my procedures. That's the auto throttle switch. The checklist wants it on now. Personally, I'm more of a fan to turn the auto throttle on the lineup on the runway, so that you can't accidentally hit the toga button while you are taxiing, but that is something that you have to make out with yourself. In any case, this concludes our tutorial. Next up is going to be the taxi, which will have its dedicated tutorial. Thank you very much for watching. As always, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, And if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.